Thanks, everyone, for joining us at the Project Censored radio show. We're very glad today to be joined by Nikki Morse, Noam Brown, and Prince Jooveh. Nikki Morse is an associate professor of media studies at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and a founding member of the Community Hotline for Incarcerated People, CHIP. Their research has been published in feminist media studies, porn studies, jump cut discourse, and elsewhere. They're also a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, which has landed them on Turning Point USA's Professor Watch List. Congraties. Noam Brown is a founding member of the Community Hotline for Incarcerated People and initiator of the Bending the Bars album project. He has been involved in social justice activism and community building in so-called South Florida for 20 plus years and is committed to prison abolition and anti-oppression in all its forms. Professionally, Noam is a children's music specialist with particular emphasis on early childhood. Prince Jooveh is a revolutionary, self-taught intellectual and a multifaceted artist. After spending half his life behind bars, he describes himself as a reformed, militant individual who uses his voice to fight against injustices for those who don't have the know-how or the energy to fight against a system that's weighted against them. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So we're here to talk about the project Bending the Bars, a 16-track album recorded under extraordinary conditions via makeshift jail phone setups to capture the raw, unfiltered artistry of 15 incarcerated creators, while also fostering community by uniting artists from rival gangs. Supported by the Community Hotline for Incarcerated Individuals and outside collaborators like Grammy winners Alphabet Rockers, this album stands as a replicable model for using music to empower, rehabilitate, and offer incarcerated individuals opportunities beyond bars and razor wire. So diving right in here, y'all, I wanted to talk to you about the genesis of this project. How did this idea come up? And perhaps more importantly, and much more difficultly than just having an idea, how did you start organizing around it, not least of all considering the remarkable difficulties of organizing inside prison and between rival gangs?
I'll start us off and then hand it over to Noam because Noam was the person who originally came up with the idea. And we were running a hotline, hearing from people who are incarcerated in Florida jails, South Florida jails, especially Broward County, documenting experiences during COVID-19. But people who were calling to share their experiences were also asking to share their artistry. And Noam, who's a musician, said, why can't we make an album? What if we took these verses that we were hearing on the phone lines and that were recorded on our hotline software? And what if we brought in collaborators on the outside with access to equipment and brought these tracks to life? So that was the genesis of the idea. And from there, we went to raise money and then also connected with incarcerated organizers. And I'll hand it over to Noam to talk more about that process of organizing, of connecting incarcerated artists with outside collaborators and things like that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, just in a nutshell, I think you pretty much framed it really well, Nikki. And from there, we just reached out to people we knew, and then also people that we were hearing about as people were hearing about the project, both inside and outside. They had ideas. Hey, you should reach out to this person. You should reach out to my cousin over here who does, so there was all sorts of energy behind it. And we just started reaching out to people who we thought, would be interested. And it just kind of caught momentum, and it was just a lot of work, a lot of communicating to try to get that ball rolling, and not all the people that we found that were interested followed through. So that there was some of that. But yeah, that's pretty much how the process started, and it took a while, but part of it taking a while too is that it allowed us to really nurture and foster some relationships over that time.
And Gary Field was really vital to the organizing. He's an incarcerated organizer. He was in Broward County Jail at the time. So he would connect with folks in the jail, build those bridges, work with people who, in general, he was really interested in mentoring. And so, would support young folks with a lot of creativity who maybe weren't ready to be disciplined to lay down a demo track and work with us through that process. He would support them, and he did a lot of that mending fences and helping folks from different backgrounds, and also, as he's noted, different rival gangs to be able to work together so that we could pursue the album and not have it be, undermined by the kinds of violences and tensions that the system is designed to support. So most of the people that are on this album, we were connected to through Gary, and he was vital in bringing the album to life. But in the case of Prince Jooveh, that is a slightly different story. And so I don't know, Prince Jooveh, if you want to talk about how you got connected to the album, because that's its own story of relationship building and networking.
Of course. Yes, I've been connected through with Noam and Nikki through our late friend Karen Smith. Um, I was incarcerated at the time. I just completed a 17-year, 9-month prison sentence, originally a 20-year sentence. Um, so Karen, before she passed, she was trying to link me with other individuals that were doing, creating, and putting out, or at least trying to put out music. I was extremely interested. I had been writing music since I was 11 years old, recording music. So I definitely wanted to still be able to do music while I was incarcerated, still express my artistry, um, and still just create. So Karen linked me with Tuesday, who was featured on the album, and Tuesday linked me with Noam, and Noam linked me with Nikki, and we all came together. We just had some ideas, and we talked about how we can get it done, and we just went straight forward. So I had to. Songs was really hard to get on. Of course, we recorded on um, collect phone calls, 30-minute calls. Some guys 15. But yeah, I would get up early in the morning, somewhere like around like 8 o'clock when the phones first came on, probably 8:01, and Nikki, well, not Nikki, no, Noam and Tuesday would be ready for me around 8, and we would patch into the hotline, and we would just go over recording. I would listen to the instrumental on one phone, and I would dial another phone, and I would rap my lyrics into the second phone, through calling the hotline. So I would do my verses in different ways. I would do it regularly, and then I would punch in a few lines at a time. And they just had a whole database of my vocals, and they had a producer that they put build up the beat for me. Noam had his brother who did his mastering, did the mastering on the track. So it was without the combination of these wonderful, extraordinary individuals, the project wouldn't be what it is. I know on my end or anywhere throughout the project for any other of the other individuals involved. It took us coming together, and this is a prime example of coordination between like-minded individuals on the inside and the outside to make something beautiful happen. So I would definitely get up early while all the guys would sleep, other inmates. Also, um, you know, we had to work around, other guys. It's probably like 70 guys and 4 phones. So I had to make sure that guys, other inmates knew what I was doing and knew a time frame that I was trying to get it done. Um, I had to kind of make sure the guards didn't see exactly what I was doing. It worked out extremely well, but there was definitely some trying and difficult conditions around getting it done. But To sum all of it up, it just took all of these great minds in combination, working together to get it done.
Wow, yeah, and I wanna dig into that a little bit more in a minute, but I first want to focus on the importance of art, not least of all music. And I like to say that art won't topple empires, but it'll inspire those who do. And music has always been a part of movements, and it's a powerful salve for people who are going through the worst things that the system can throw at them, and it's also a powerful inspiration to fight back. And I was wondering if y'all could
And
talk a little bit about what this project meant to folks who were a part of it as a release, as inspiration, as like a form of therapy, as a way to foment collaboration in a place that is absolutely not interested in creating collaborative environments.
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. Go ahead, Julius.
yeah,
I mean,
I'll let you speak first. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Julius.
Well, being that I was one of the individuals that was incarcerated at the time, um, all of those things that you just mentioned is extremely relevant. Um, there's an emotional factor that we go through being incarcerated, mental, physical. Um, for me personally, music, the art, like you explained, like the word you use, art is a great word because uh, it allowed me personally to be able to express myself where those expressions probably never get heard outside of the walls. So the beautiful thing about it is it's a relief to know that I can create this art, expressing the things that I see every day that is normally not spoken about or acknowledged, outside of prison walls or county jail walls. Um, it definitely is a stress reliever. You know, it also allows you to feel empowerment, knowing that the system doesn't want us to have these expressions. They don't want these expressions to project beyond the walls. However, we made an opportunity, we made an avenue to do that. And that's a feeling of empowerment. So even though I was sitting in a place where I was supposed to have no power, no confidence, none of that, none of the above, we were able to come together through this art, through this music, and put these expressions out to people who are not locked up, and those who have probably formerly been locked up. It's just a feeling. It's a great feeling of satisfaction of you know, hey man, we did something that wasn't supposed to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna add. I mean, you pretty much said most of the things that I was gonna add as well, because that's been my experience from talking to all the artists from this album. And Gary Field, this we can't really say enough about Gary Field, who's the other executive producer, and he's an artist on this album as well. How integral he is um, to this project. But he called the Broward County jails like the incubator for talent, or like a incubator for hip hop. It's just a lot of talent, but it just a lot of room for expression as well. So yeah, a lot of the people that I have been speaking to over the last couple of years about this, they've let me know they're coming from different places. Some of the artists have been doing this for a while. They were doing it on the outside too, and others just got started when they were inside. But pretty much to a person, they were saying that being able to be part of two things. Being able to be a part of a project like this really motivated them to put more emphasis on on their craft and on their creativity. And then the second thing is that they, uh, uh, what was the second thing I was going to say was, um, it slipped my mind for a second, but uh,
We can circle back to it later.
Okay, circle back.
Just put a
Sorry.
pin in it, and then in the midst of something else, you can be like, I got it.
Okay.
So I wanted to, because something that we also talk a lot about on the Project Censored Show is reporting and the censorship of reporting, and we've had folks like Jeremy Busby, who's a journalist who's incarcerated, on the show to talk about, for instance, once he was taken into the warden's office and the warden pointed at the fence and he said, do you know why that's there? And he said, well, and Jeremy goes, yeah, well, it's to keep everybody in. And the warden goes, no, it's to keep everybody out. So you're messing up our system. You're telling the world what's going on in here, and that's not okay. I don't like that. And so this music is not just art, it's also a form of reporting, because you are talking about what's going on the inside. And I was wondering if you could walk us through some of the tracks and talk about how they are literally like a report, a journalistic report from the inside.
It's a great question. And I think one thing I want to highlight is that our project is pretty unique because we didn't have any collaboration with the carceral facilities. So as Prince Jooveh was saying, this was not supposed to happen. And there were times when our phone lines were blocked, and we've encountered a lot of other kinds of hurdles. And this isn't to deny the value of music projects where the system is involved. That creates opportunities that we didn't have. But because we weren't restrained or restricted by what the system wanted us to be able to say and who the system wanted us to be able to talk to, the album is able to express things, that otherwise might not be able to be expressed. And I'll name a couple of the tracks that are really more interested in what you're describing, that kind of reporting. But also the tracks go well beyond that. And that was something that was also important to us, was to encourage people to speak to, whatever they wanted to share. And it didn't have to be an accounting of trauma. But for many folks, of course, what they were going through, really impacted what they shared. And so, of course, Prince Jooveh's track is an incredible analysis of racism in the system and the way that guards are complicit in this, horrific structure. We've got County Time by ZQ, which talks about his experiences in county jail and is just really powerful storytelling with a lot of detail about what those daily experiences are like. Four Walls by OTW Ghostman talks about the nuances, the details of daily life. Locked Down by Chance is a really incredible narrative of the experience that she had when she was incarcerated in the beginning of COVID-19. And at that time, she had just been locked up with her sister caring for her children on the outside. And her sister recorded a verse for the track and also provided the beat. So this collaboration between the two of them, tracks what it was like for each of them on the inside and the outside, dealing with the system in COVID-19, with Akira, the DJ, caring for Chance's children while also navigating homelessness, and all of this amid COVID-19. So all of these stories are on the album, along with a range of other stories, experiences, and perspectives. Noam, is there any track you want to highlight? What are the stories that I'm not naming?
Well, there are, 15, 16 tracks on there, but I would also just add, once again, bringing Gary Field into this conversation. He's the final track on the album, which is Tearing Down Walls and Building Bridges. So, which is exactly what we're talking about here, which is also what I was going to say before, which is that idea of, the prisons and the jails. They're just they're seems like their job is to sever connections, and by doing this, that was something that artists, I heard a lot. Not just from artists, but just being on the hotline in general. It's people really being appreciative and moved by the bridges, that the hotline facilitated, and knowing that they were heard, because it's just rare. When you're in there, it's hard enough with the high cost of phone calls and all the other barriers, including like the postcard only policy for incoming and outgoing mail from the Broward County jails, to stay connected with your loved ones, you know, and for them to stay connected with you, with them. So, you know, being able to have the hotline and create, you know, create this art through the hotline is definitely something that um, was just like a tremendous outgrowth from this project.
Can I add one more thing about that? So, in terms of this question of how art inspires movements, I think it also sustains people. So, for so many people, like Prince Jooveh, who was an organizer with the prison strike in 2018, the folks who are making the music for the album, in some cases, are activists and organizers who are trying to survive. And the art and the communities that we were able to build through that networking helps them survive. And then on the other hand, because this project was a project that was about art and artists, hip hop creators, we were connecting to folks who weren't necessarily already politically radicalized in the way that someone like Prince Jooveh is. And so we had these really rich opportunities for conversation and connection that, again, the prisons are designed to eliminate. So little news can get into prisons and jails. And so people are really restricted in the information they have. And I remember with one particular track, we ended up having these rich conversations. I know Noam had a conversation with the artist about a line that said, "It's not Black Lives Matter, it's all lives matter." And the artist wasn't aware of the kind of external discourses that shape how that term would be taken up. And so they got to have a really good conversation about the ways that racial justice was being distorted, perverted by the All Lives Matter, quote unquote, movement. And that artist also ended up having a great conversation with me. That's now a track on the album, the 16th track, because some of the lyrics in the song were misogynistic. And I wanted to learn more about what he meant and where he was coming from. We had an hour-long conversation, which meant he had to call back using someone else's pin in order to keep talking. And, you know, each learned a lot from the other, including, you know, sharing knowledge, sharing experience, and both of us, I think, becoming politicized in new ways in terms of understanding other perspectives. And so this is another thing that I think the album project has enabled, is people building knowledge, building the ability to learn from and talk to each other and talk across difference, et cetera. So that's something I think is really valuable.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to you've touched on it here and there, but I want to dig in a little bit more into the pushback from the prisons, because as you said, it wasn't something that they, you know, put their stamp of approval on. And as as we all know, prisons are not exactly a place where they're trying to cultivate collaborative projects. So I'm curious, like, what kind of specific pushbacks from the jails did you get?
Uh, Nikki, I don't know if you have a different response to this, but we we really just did not involve them at all, you know. So they may have been aware of the project, and they may not have, but we never interacted with anyone from the jail about. Nobody ever contacted us saying, "Hey,
That's
we know you're doing this project," and so there, you know, so there's nothing that we were aware of. But I don't know if you have any other like perspective or information on that, Nikki,
I would
or Prince Juva.
disagree, and I would love to hear what Prince Juvah's experience was in prison, but I think that the jail was aware, and that's why our phones
Mm,
got shut down for 3
mm.
months during the midst of trying to build those connections. And that was also when we started noticing that our mail got censored. So for about a year, for about a year, the jail where we were primarily working was allowing us to send in newsletters that were full 8.5 by 11 sheets. And this was amidst already having implemented a postcard-only policy. So we were still sending in our newsletters, even though in general only postcards were allowed. And it was as we were starting the album project, as we were starting to recruit people, that we got transferred to the mail ban list and we're told we could only send postcards. And for me, that was a huge barrier in that moment, because one of the things we were trying to do was send in contracts so that people who were inside could have the legal language of what they were agreeing to. We could set up, a formal structure for them to get paid, all of those things. Suddenly, literally a month before all the contracts were going to get mailed in, our mail was blocked. And so we had to create incredible workarounds to be able to make all of those practical details solidified. So I think they were aware, and I think they also didn't like anything else that the hotline was doing. So the hotline has spoken to 700 people in the county jail and has documented hundreds of cases of medical neglect. We were not popular. Now these days, when I call and I try to speak to someone at the jail, they often will say, "Wait, are you Nicole?" And they know that we are, as it were, as I think Gary described it, a mosquito in their living space. So we're very small, but we are bothering them. And so because of that, I think that the album project was something that they did try to restrict and target. And so what it meant for us is that we had to find ways to work around those barriers. But every single strategy that we developed to work around those barriers is something that loved ones or other community orgs could also use. And that's why, for me, it's so valuable that we weren't partnering with the jail, because although that would have given us the additional access and a smoother process, it meant that everything we discovered in terms of how could we maintain communication, how could we get around these barriers, these are things that are useful to anyone who's trying to communicate with folks inside. So that's my take. That I think that we were facing a level of repression that was because of the politics of the album, not so much because they didn't want people creating art. But I'm wondering, from Prince Jooveh's experience, what was the dynamic with guards and administrators in the prison in terms of, doing this work, doing this recording?
Yeah, of course. Well, there's different forms of communication that we receive from the outside. One, we've dominantly been talking about phone calls, also mail, and the last one, electronic emails. So I want to go ahead and say this. I can see the complication with mail that Nicole is talking about, because when you're dealing with mail that has federal protections, law protections, to the point where they can't all the way scrutinize or be able to, stop the communication. However, when they went to, when they did away with U.S. Postal, and in the county jails, they were doing postcards. It makes things extremely harder. For us in the prison system, they did away with mail entirely, whether it be postcard or letters. So that affected me, because newsletters, information that I was getting from CHIP, that I was getting from other organizations like Prisoner Solidarity Group, I no longer was able to get those. So I know Nikki and Noam had to start communicating with me personally through electronic emails. Now the emails were harder because they were censored very extremely. So if they felt like there was any type of sensitive words, you're just not gonna receive that electronic email at all. Now, when it comes to phone calls, I heard Nikki express that some of the phone calls we were not allowed at one time. They do that as well. And it's always different institutions. One institution would be different from the next because of the administration and the classification and the warden, all of those individuals deciding to do whatever they wanted to do. And what they normally wanted to do is to restrict a strong connection from those on the inside with those on the outside, especially doing work like Nikki and Noam has been doing. They don't want inmates to have that to kind of support. So there's other things that they do that I have experienced uh, prior to Nikki and Noam. Uh, and you know, it mainly is surrounded around restricting who you're allowed to call. So they can just block access to a number once they decide that they don't want you talking to them. Um, but those are the main complications. Other complications are if they feel like you're doing anything that they can deem to be a security. You know, they utilize this broad language of security threat. So anything can be a security threat to them. So that can make it to the point where they block off your phone calls. They'll throw you in a solitary cell under investigation until they feel like they want to determine whatever is going on or whether it's safe or not. And it's extremely difficult. They know how to make things extremely difficult, and that's what they do. So I can't. By the time I started recording this project, I had been bounced around probably about 3 institutions. So we spoke about this project and started this project when I was at Blackwater Private Institution. The private institutions are probably better than the state institutions, but we got a little started at the private institution, and then I got transferred to Taylor Correctional, where we were able to finish. It took a while for me to get the same contract that Nikki was talking about. It delayed in the mail for a little bit. So I didn't even know if I was going to get that contract or not, but luckily I was able to get it and mail it back out to Nikki. And there's other ways that you can utilize the mailing system. The only way that we still get mail in prison now, in and out, is legal mail. So I can probably try to send my contract out as a legal mail and hope that the law staff or the legal mail staff won't be trying to read through everything that I have or restrict it. So, you know, I remember that it was one particular time where I had legal mail staff just actually reading through everything that I had and I was sending out. And when it comes to legal mail, they're not supposed to actually read your mail. They're just supposed to scan across it and make sure that you're not sending out or receiving any contraband. However, that rarely ever happens as it's supposed to. So, so those are some of the complications. Those are all of the complications between emails, phones, and mail. Emails is the hardest because you won't know that you know who sent you an email or what they restricted it for, because they'll just say sensitive sensitive language or censored because it goes against security or a security threat. So those are all the complications that all of us have to deal with in the prison system. I'm not sure how they conduct themselves in the county jails, but they have a lot of oppressive tactics, and we were able to basically get through all of that.
I'll just add that I tried to send Prince Jooveh's lyrics to Gary because Gary had not been able to hear the track or get to know the story. And I'd played the track for Gary over the phone line, but he couldn't quite hear it because the quality of the sound isn't that good. You know, what we do is play from a Bluetooth speaker and hold a cell phone up to the Bluetooth speaker so the person inside can sort of hear what's been recorded, mixed, and mastered. Gary asked for the lyrics. I sent the lyrics, and within a few hours, I got an email back. Your email was censored, security threat. So Prince Jooveh's lyrics themselves, you know, were censored, and Gary has not yet received them.
Feels very on brand. So wrapping up here, I mean, it says when Nikki, when you sent me the information about this, it says that it's something that can be replicated elsewhere. And I was wondering if you had any comments about that. Like, how would you like to see this replicated, or how could folks replicate this? Understanding, of course, that it's not easy.
Anybody want to jump? I would like to see any kind of bridge building replicated. When I say replicated, just the idea of building, connecting inside and outside replicated in your own way. If people wanted to, take this exact model and consult with us and, pick our brains about what the process looked like and what some of the challenges were that we overcame so we can help people, do this exact kind of project or something very similar. That would be great. But really any kind of project, could be artistic or otherwise, I think would be wonderful. I mean, we also, aside from the music, people have been sending us a lot of artwork in the mail as well. Before the postcard only policy, it was on, letters, and then after which it was like for example, the person who designed the album cover art, Morning Fox, when he was inside, he's out now. When he was inside, he would send us about 8 different postcards that put together, came together as a puzzle. And that was the workaround for that, for, a larger piece. But, any kind of connecting inside and outside is really, one of our goals. Yeah, for sure. Trying to inspire that.
One thing that Gary Field has been really constantly guiding us toward is to turn our experience of this into a short documentary that can provide a kind of blueprint and inspiration, and also a set of tools for how to think through the problems, because some of the problems we encountered are problems people might not encounter with the carceral facilities in their own locale. Some of the solutions we came up with might not have been the best solutions, and people might have to invent new solutions. And so it's both about replicating some of the exact strategies of, when people inside don't have access to a platform, they don't have the ability to get their voices out there, they don't have access to music, beats, etc. We found ways to bridge that gap. And then also, how do you think creatively to, continue to work in partnership, inside-outside partnership, to overcome whatever the challenges are, knowing, again, that each time you figure out a workaround, a strategy, that it's something that can be used beyond the collaboration to keep those connections going.
Good
Yeah,
point.
absolutely. So this comes out, this album, Bending the Bars, the 16-track album that we've been talking about today, that comes out in June. What's the best place or places for folks to check that out and also to follow the work that y'all do?
So the best place is social media, where we are sharing information about the album and also celebrating each one of the singles that we're releasing. We're releasing 9 singles in the weeks leading up to the album release. The first one was Prince Jooveh, so that was out on April 4th. You can catch it on any streaming platform. It's called Hands Up. Prince Jooveh, that's Jooveh. And as we release the singles, we're trying to tell the story of the album. And that'll be the best way to pre-save tracks, to learn more about the artists, to follow their social media for the artists who have that, and then also to catch the press that we're hoping to generate. And, we're super grateful to be able to join Project Censored and speak about this project and how we were able to get it out despite the bars, the razor wire, and all of the censorship that structures the prison.
So to be a little bit more specific about the social media, because there are a lot out there. So Instagram and TikTok is really the main ones, and it's Bending the Bars with underscores between the words. Yeah, and our website too, chipsouthfl.org. But yeah, I would definitely agree that the social media is where it's at, and Nikki has been spearheading, leading the charge with that 100%.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, y'all. Really appreciate you taking the time, not just to join us, but to create this amazing project. So thank you so much.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
having us.